5 years ago, Hurricane Laura brought extreme winds and over 15 feet of storm surge to southwest Louisiana. At the time, Laura became the strongest hurricane to hit Louisiana since the 1856 Last Island hurricane. I'm Storm Team 10 meteorologist Adam Olivier. Winds from the storm exceeded 130 miles per hour, trashing downtown Lake Charles. One of the most memorable videos shows windows blowing out of the Chase Tower downtown. The building damaged beyond repair had to be demolished in 2024. Laura changed life for so many in southwestern Louisiana, and there's many signs of the storm's destructive power still visible today. Let's take a look back at Hurricane Laura and its impact to the area viewed through KLFY's lens.
Headed towards our chief meteorologist, Heath Morton. He has been tracking the latest on Hurricane Laura. Heath, what's the latest forecast?
Here's what it looks like on the visual. A very big hurricane there. You can see the eye very well. Diameter about 35 miles, moving to the northwest now at about 15 miles per hour, probably about 8 or 9 hours from landfall.
We're down here by the Delcambre Canal, and the wind gusts are picking up a little bit, but what it's really doing is bringing all of this water that's in the Delcambre Canal right in here into the city. We were here on Monday here by the Delcambre Canal, and this water was a solid 4 feet lower than it was now.
Right now, wind's still at 140 or 150, I should say. The next update comes out probably in the next 25 minutes, and we'll see if this is a Cat 5 hurricane. Whether it's a 4 or 5, the devastation's not going to change a whole lot. It just lacks 7 miles per hour from being a Cat 5 hurricane. So don't focus so much on the category. Focus on the winds that are way, way up there, and this could go down as one of the strongest hurricanes to ever hit the United States.
Guys, it's very active here at the moment. The wind is blowing. There's quite a bit of rain coming down, but here's the main concern. The road is starting to become flooded. Now, you're asked not to drive in the road if it is covered in water. I'm standing here and I'm actually starting to lose traction because of the currents and the wind both combined.
Seconds ago, I was measuring the wind speed and we're getting gusts upwards of 35 miles an hour. The trees are really beginning to move, and it's a pretty cool sight to see the water being swept off the roof of the hotel. Those residents in this area, if you have loved ones in this area, you may want to let them know they want to strap it on tight because they're going to be alone until the weather conditions clear up and first responders can get out there to perform some type of rescue if needed.
We're north of Erath. We just left Delcambre. We're just driving around a little bit, and you can see some, here's one. There's not very many big trees down, but a couple of smaller branches on those bigger trees have been coming down.
We're seeing the wind picking up here in Lake Arthur. In fact, we've been hearing different things affected by the wind and rain here. Before we saw it, we heard what sounded like a tin roof or a shed blowing through, and it wasn't until a couple minutes later that we saw it out on the road behind me. But really, as you can see, things are becoming more and more intense every 10 minutes or so here.
But that just shows how extensive how this wind can cause extensive damage. And I'm sure that in the morning hours, as the sun does eventually come up, we will see some of that damage in the trees down.
This is the first that we've seen of an entire light pole that's been down. If you can zoom in on this, Robert, I'm not sure how much you can see, but this entire pole, this metal pole, has just been snapped. It's just been snapped completely over. Right in here, it's just incredible the amount of force that takes to knock this over. You can see it right here blocking the road.
There was no water in this parking lot when we got here, and this is just over 20 minutes. This is how quickly storm surge can actually rise, and the current is also a major issue. That's why you're asked not to drive in the water. The current could easily pull you off the road, and that could become a major issue. But let's take a closer look down here towards the Gulf. Now, like I said, we were here earlier this morning. We were actually out there. We had to leave because the storm surge was so bad. But just take a look. The water stretches as far as the eye can see.
The sun has come up here in Lake Charles, and I've got to tell you, my God, this is the most damage that I have ever seen with my own eyes from a hurricane ever in my career. I'm going to go ahead and step out of the way and let you look. This is Preen Lake Drive, and from one end of Preen Lake Drive to the other, this is what it looks like. Just pure destruction.
Hey, everybody. So we were actually wrapping up our storm coverage here in Calcasieu Parish, headed back home on 210, and we saw this large cloud of black smoke. It was covering the highway, but it somehow risen up.
Just take a look in the distance. You can see right under the I-10 bridge is the riverboat that apparently has come away from the dock during the storm from the Isle of Capri Casino that's on that western part of the side of the lake. And apparently the riverboat is lodged underneath the bridge or the structures of the bridge. We'll probably find that out a little bit later, but right now that riverboat's not going anywhere, and it just goes to show you the incredible magnitude, the power of Hurricane Laura as it came through. There are several floors that had all of the windows just blown out from the high winds from Hurricane Laura. And I counted, and it wasn't easy, but there are hundreds of panels of glass that need to be replaced on this building. And each panel is about, I'd say, 10 feet by 5 feet, and that's just a guess. But this is just pure destructive power of Hurricane Laura, and it really looks like a bomb went off here and shattered all of the windows. And let me go ahead and give you a good look at what one of these pieces looks like. This is a piece of one of the windows that was blown out. It's about a 1/4 inch thick glass, tinted, reflective, and this is going to be a big job for someone to replace hundreds of windows in this building, and it's going to be expensive too, I'm sure.
Next, I talk with Doug Kramer of the National Weather Service in Lake Charles about how Laura impacted them. Well, I'm here joined by Doug Kramer from the National Weather Service in Lake Charles. He is the warning coordination meteorologist there. He's going to talk a little bit of these incredible details that happened back in 2020 with Laura. I mean, that was just an amazing storm on so many levels, but y'all took the brunt of it.
You know, that was a high-end Category 4 hurricane, just really close to being a Category 5. And unfortunately, the eye of that storm went right over a populated area, Lake Charles. So yeah, you know, the area continues to be scarred from that storm in terms of the vegetation. You still see a lot of blue tarps on infrastructure, and so we're still in a little bit of a recovery phase. So yeah, it was definitely a life-changing storm.
And especially for y'all at the National Weather Service, I went out there right after the storm, and the radar dome, the thing that looks like the big soccer ball on top, just trashed. I mean, it was destroyed. It took, what, 6 months for y'all to get the radar back, I think?
That's exactly right. It took a few months, and you know, that's a very expensive piece of equipment, but it's a very important piece of equipment, and so yeah, we had to replace that and get a new one. So fortunately, we do have a new one now. It's working just fine. There was a minimal damage to the actual office, the building itself. We are still in that same location. But yeah, we're really hoping that we never have to experience anything like that ever again.
It's amazing, you know, to try and thread the needle and, you know, get into the eye of a hurricane is a lot of meteorologists' dream. And it's very difficult to do, but the fact that that happened right at a National Weather Service office, we lost the data as the eye wall was getting in there, but y'all had some impressive wind gusts right before that, the main part of the storm came through. What, I know that y'all had to go and actually evacuate yourselves, and I think Beaumont took over, or not Beaumont, Brownsville took over for y'all, right, during that time.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and we were gone for several weeks. But yeah, we have a really good backup plan, mutual aid plan at the National Weather Service in our southern region, and Brownsville, which is an office that's a long way away, and a long way away from the storm's impacts. They were able to kind of take over and handle our operations there for a while.
And what goes into doing something like that? Like, let's say Brownsville this year is getting hit by a bad storm, and they have to give off their place to you. What goes into that? Having to forecast for a completely different area.
Sure, and it's totally doable. We just set up our weather equipment to localize it to South Texas, and we basically do the same operations for Brownsville as we would do for Lake Charles. Sometimes it's going to require some increase in staff. So there's times where we bring in other employees from other offices to come help us out with that, or we may actually bring in the employees from Brownsville to come in and they can work their own operations, but from our office. So that happens a lot. In 2005 during Rita, or post-Rita, they actually sent me from Springfield, Missouri down to Houston to work Lake Charles's operations because they were down for Rita for several weeks as well with that storm.
Wow. Well, with Laura having come through, and we saw, immediately almost right after we had Delta, what were some of the big lessons that y'all as an office took away from it, not just as a staff, but also for your community and Louisiana in general?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we take away from that is the importance of relationships. At the National Weather Service in Lake Charles, we take our relationships with our emergency management directors very seriously because they're kind of our communication conduit to the rest of our communities across South Texas and also South Louisiana. So very important that we have good relationships with our elected officials and our emergency management directors and all of their teammates that they have. It's important that the communication flow is very well too. So we need to make sure that we're serving them and giving them the right information that they need so they can make the right decisions to keep people safe and then to also mitigate damage to infrastructure. So that continual communication, having ways to communicate, whether it's conference calls or our decision support packets, graphical messaging, all that's very important to those partners that we serve. And I think that's the best thing that we can do going forward to prepare our communities and so we can make good decisions to keep people safe when we have these hurricanes.
Well, Doug, thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate all your hard work and dedication over in Lake Charles, and look forward to seeing you, hopefully not for a hurricane, but in the future, maybe come back on to help us out with severe weather and stuff like that.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
After the break, I sit down with Storm Team 10 Chief Meteorologist Heath Morton to talk about his experience covering Hurricane Laura. Well, today we're looking back at the history of Hurricane Laura, a storm that really, for the longest period, we didn't have anything nearly as strong as this storm. And Laura actually was tied now with Ida and the 1856 hurricane as the strongest to hit Louisiana. But, Heath, we both went through this storm, and we both saw what happened with it. And I think one thing for me that sticks out the most from that time, it was around the lunch hour the day before, and the Weather Service in Lake Charles put out that statement that said unsurvivable storm surge. And I remember reading that on air and just kind of being like, this is the real deal.
I remember that too, and I'm like, this is really scary because I went through Gustav. That was my first big hurricane that I dealt with here, and then really not much since then. So Laura was coming in, and I had it going toward Lake Charles, but I thought, if this moves 30 miles, 40 miles further east, it's going to be a totally different ballgame for us. It's going to be bad. So unfortunately, it did go to Lake Charles, and they had to deal with it. But we kind of lucked out on that because, we had some tree damage and we had some heavy rain, but it really wasn't that bad. But when you see unsurvivable storm surge, you think this is not going to be good. And if that would have hit Vermilion Bay, the storm surge could have come as far north as Youngsville or maybe further north. And that's a scenario we have to think about, when something like that threatens, close to home.
Yeah, and we've seen, time and time again. I mean, I already brought up Ida, but we had Ian, we've had Idalia, we've had Helene, you name the storms, even Erin recently this year that have just rapidly strengthened. And for me, that's the scariest part. I mean, with Laura, we saw that rapid strengthening as it was approaching the coast. We watched that eye just really stand out on satellite imagery, and that image is seared into my mind as you're telling people, you need to get out of Dodge. And thankfully, a lot of people did, but we saw the destruction.
Yeah, and like you said, that's the scary part is you may have a weak system, like a tropical storm, maybe a Cat 1 hurricane in the Gulf. You think, this doesn't have time to develop, but you saw what happened. Erin, it went from a Cat 1 to Cat 5 within like 12 hours. And that's happened a lot. Michael, It blew up, and like all those you named. So it's one of those things, it's just the way it is now, that we have to watch out for that rapid intensification, where you may go from a Cat 1 to Cat 4 or 5 in 12 to 24 hours. And, you know, and the models just don't handle it well.
Yeah.
That's the problem. They, you know, that's the biggest thing forecasting hurricanes. Decent with track, but the intensity is, there's a lot to be, you know, we need a lot of improvement on the intensity forecast.
Yeah, and that's why we continually tell you, always prepare for a category higher or even more. You know, when we say it's going to be a category 1, you got to be thinking category 2, potentially even category 3, because we have seen just go back to Aaron, you know, where, oh, it's going to go to maybe a major hurricane, and this thing's a category 5 in, you know, a 12-hour span. So, you know, there's so much that goes on with this, but especially with Laura, it was a weird situation because we started out, we had Marco, which formed in the Caribbean.
The old Marco.
Little old Marco.
Most people probably don't remember that one.
Right, and Marco actually came right up to the coast and was a category 1 hurricane before it just completely dissipated.
Right, it fell apart.
But it helped to kind of bring Laura and move it into Louisiana, whereas models thought Marco was going to be the big threat and Laura was going to be, whatever. It was the complete reverse.
Yeah, I think we had one shower that passed over the station with Marco, and that was it. It was a non-event, which is good. But I remember too with Laura, there was some wind shear near the coast, and we thought it would weaken, but it didn't. You know, that's the thing, is like once they get that strong, even some wind shear and drier air may not weaken them enough.
No.
So we have to keep that in mind. Like you said, always expect a category higher, because I thought, the wind shear is pretty strong, 100 miles off the coast, so it'll probably weaken it, or at least keep it from strengthening. Not really. It just kept barreling on.
Well, I mean, you talk about that, and you go back to 2002 with Hurricane Lily. We had a Category 4, 150 miles off the coast. By the time it made landfall, it was a Category 1.
Right.
The complete reverse of what we're talking about. But that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, nowadays, we're looking at these storms that even intensify on land with what we call the brown ocean effect, which is another topic we'll get into another time. But, you know, another thing that I remember, too, about Laura is the storm surge reached 30 miles inland. Now, of course, here in Louisiana, what is land, what is water?
Right.
But the idea is, in Cameron Parish, the entire parish, storm surge flowed right through that into Calcasieu Parish.
Right.
That's incredible to think about.
Yeah, I think they had, they were expecting it all to be into Lake Charles, like the storm surge. And, you know, that's going to be the case with Lafayette if we get a Cat 5 that hits near Vermilion Bay. And it would have to be the perfect setup.
Right.
You know, everything have to be perfect, but still it could happen. And we have to always prepare for that. But yeah, it was scary to see how far north storm surge was going to be. And they evacuated KPLC in Lake Charles, and they went to Baton Rouge. They're like, they didn't hang around.
Well, thankfully they didn't, because their tower came down on the studio.
Right.
And so that could have been a really bad situation. Another thing is, I had some friends that actually were in the middle of Laura out in Lake Charles. And one of the craziest things they talked about was in the eye, because the eye went right over Lake Charles. I mean, you know, I've spent my whole life trying to get into the eye of a hurricane and have not. Some of my friends, first time they go to a hurricane, they go right, you know, right into the eye. But they're looking up, it's a beautiful clear sky because, you know, the eye is completely clear. And then all of a sudden, the wind just picks up out of nowhere. It was one of those little mesovortices that was rotating around. And so when you look at the damage that was done in Lake Charles, a lot of it probably came from those little mesovortices that just kind of kick up all the debris that's lying about and then slam it into stuff.
Yeah, I was seeing reports of, it looked like they were seeing tornado damage from some of those vortices coming through 130, 140 mile per hour in Lake Charles. And you know, from those, it's like those tornadoes that rotate through, and it's almost impossible to see on radar. I mean, they don't show up well on radar. So it's like with Laura here, they issued that huge tornado warning, the second
largest ever.
because of those tornadoes, you know, inside of the squall lines, or the not squall lines, but the
outer bands.
Outer bands, yeah, the squalls, outer bands. But yeah, I mean, you get inside that eye wall, you can get some intense, you know, vortices in there, you know, and it's right in the middle, it's calm, but right around that wall, it can be pretty impressive.
It's amazing to see the structure of these storms as they work their way on in. And, you know, you talked about the tornado threat with them, and we had to really, or I guess a better way of putting this would be, we struggled a lot with Laura because we didn't have radar.
Right.
Lake Charles radar got knocked completely out by those strong winds.
Right.
And so that's why we saw such a large tornado warning for our area. We had nothing to work with. I mean, we were coming out of Fort Polk radar, and that's, you know, seeing way up in the atmosphere, not at the surface where these little spin-ups would happen. So it really caused a lot of difficulties, maybe not so much for us here in Acadiana, but definitely for our friends over in Lake Charles.
Exactly. I told my wife, I said, you know, get Annie's my daughter. Y'all go to the bathtub and stay there till I say come out, because, you know, inside those heavy rain bands, you know, you get those tornadoes, and you just, like you said, they're hard to see because the radar beam's going up, and those the rotation is much lower. So I said, just go to the bathtub, stay there till I tell you to come out. And you know, luckily we didn't have as much damage here, but yeah, that's the biggest threat. We're on the east side, so we get that tornado threat. And Laura didn't really produce a lot of tornadoes here.
No.
You know, it was. We had the tornado warning, but we didn't have a lot of tornadoes. Some like Beryl last year produced like a record-breaking tornadoes. You know, it was a Cat 1. You know,
Yep.
so you know, some do produce a lot, others don't.
Well, what is one thing that you took away from your experience with Laura?
I guess just the fact that the models were way too west. Like the European, I learned has a very westerly bias. It was taken, even the ensembles with the European were going toward Houston, and a lot of the other models had it more west. And I've noticed since then that a lot of models have the western bias, so it helps me to forecast better that a lot of these may be further east. Same thing with Ida. You know, a few days out, it had it coming right through Acadiana, and it went over toward New Orleans.
Yeah.
And that's where it hit. So I think Francine, same thing.
Yeah.
I
Then
mean,
that has been a recent trend where we've seen these models really gung-ho on, you know, one path, but in reality there is that eastward push
Eastward
there.
push,
So-
exactly.
Well, Heath, thank you so much for sharing
Absolutely.
your experiences with us for this remembrance of Hurricane Laura 5 years later. Wow.
It's hard to believe, and it was a COVID year. I mean,
On top of everything
I mean,
else.
yeah, you know, what a year that was. It was crazy, but yeah.
What a year. Coming up, a look at Laura's lasting impact to southwestern Louisiana. Hurricane Laura was a storm most residents of southwestern Louisiana feared. It took 15 years for a storm similar to Rita, the last devastating hurricane to hit Louisiana. But when Laura roared ashore, it showed its teeth. From the extreme winds to the nearly 20 feet of storm surge, Laura left an impact still being felt across the region. As we reach 5 years since landfall, Laura reminds us of how fast tropical systems can turn from just a tropical storm to an absolute beast. It's the reason why we tell you to prepare for a category above what is forecast. And of course, if you are told to leave, leave. Laura produced an unsurvivable storm surge that wiped most of Cameron Parish away, down only to slabs. Many residents of Cameron never returned. The surge also reshaped our coastline. And as we remember Laura 5 years later, we should also use the experience to better prepare ourselves for future storms. As for Lake Charles and the surrounding areas, they still need help as they rebuild from the ferocious winds of Laura. For the rest of Louisiana, Laura's destruction can be used to help us get ready for the next big one, whenever that one arrives. Thanks for watching. For KLFY News 10, I'm Storm Team 10 meteorologist Adam Olivier.